Good evening, everyone. My name is Cluewright. I own Cluewright's Investigations. I'm going to be doing a four-part series into Michelle O'Connell's death. And after I finish these four parts, I want you to make an informed decision. And I'm going to show you all the evidence in this case, and some of it that was never shared before, some of it that was never shared by the state attorneys, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, or the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office. When I get done with this report, I'm going to show you where there was a cover-up in the death of Michelle O'Connell. I'm going to show you where evidence was tampered with. I'm going to show you where it was altered and where it was moved, something that you have never been exposed before. But I'll begin by telling you a little bit about myself. I own Cluewright's Investigation. I've had over 40 years of fire service experience. I got multiple certifications when it comes to basic criminal investigation courses and death investigation certifications. I specialize in crime scenes investigations related to suicide, accidental death, wrongful death, and scene reconstruction in areas to determine the cause and outcomes, along with being trained as a medical legal death investigator. I think I'm more than qualified to analyze Michelle O'Connell's death. Utilizing my training experience, I can reconstruct scenes and identify hidden elements crucial for analysis. I did my review, and it did encompass expertise in all available reports, including the autopsy reports, the crime scene photos, and interviews, to ensure an objective assessment of the evidence, considering factors not explicitly mentioned in the documentation to determine if suicide or homicide was involved. But before I go any further, let me just let you know, I'm not doing any editing here. I want you to get who I am, and I'm going to explain to you from my heart about this case. I don't think anybody knows this case better than I do. So with that said, I'm going to keep going. Evidence that was discovered during my review was shared with the appropriate authorities for further action, and we're going to get in that somewhat later, and emphasizing the importance of a thorough and unbiased analysis in cases like this. I will show you the bias and the cover-up, and I did say bias and a cover-up, and I'm going to prove that to you on some of these agencies and individuals. I will show you evidence that was tampered with, altered, moved, and covered up to what I believe to hide a homicide, and I'm going to prove that. The most tragic outcome of Michelle O'Connell's death is justice did not prevail, and Sheriff David Shore at that time and his employees who worked that case covered this death up. In February of 2014, I initiated a review into the Michelle O'Connell's death, and I already told you I reviewed various documents and documentaries related to her suicide. I reviewed the crime scene photos, autopsy photos, all the police reports, medical reports, everything that there is to look at, the Sheriff's Office case summaries. I looked at multiple interviews throughout this case. The absence of critical information such as the bullet recovery at the scene, the measurements of distance and angles and directions of bullets, raises questions about the circumstances surrounding Michelle O'Connell's demise. To form an unbiased opinion on the matter, a comprehensive review of all available documents, interviews, tests, and photos and evidence is imperative in cases like this. To maintain objectivity while reviewing and investigating the death of Michelle, it was essential to approach all aspects of the analysis professionally, including considering the facts presented in those reports that was omitted. I do not know Michelle O'Connell, and I didn't know her family. I do not know Jeremy Banks or his family, and I do not know Sheriff Shore. I conducted an independent investigation. I had no financial backings in this case, and I wasn't hired by anybody in this case, and I cannot be influenced by anybody in this case. It's imperative that any investigation into the death of an individual, regardless of the cause, is conducted accurately and thoroughly. In cases where there are lingering questions or uncertainties, a death analysis and case review may be necessary to determine proper protocols or policies were followed, and if any new evidence can be utilized alongside the original investigation or evidence that was at the scene. This is particularly crucial if new evidence is discovered and proven to be factual or relevant, and that's going to be proven here today. In the case of Michelle O'Connell, her family and friends find it difficult to believe that she would have taken her own life due to various positive aspects in her life, such as a recent promotion. She had plans to find her new place. She was leaving Jeremy Banks. She had broke up with Jeremy, and she was going to go pick up her little daughter. And the love for her daughter is tremendous. So I made every effort to gather all the information that I could on this case and about this case. I carefully examined both the official cause of death, which was suicide, and the family's belief that it should have been classified as a homicide. And as an independent investigator, this examination will provide some closures and potentially uncover additional information or evidence that needs to be addressed. And it should be addressed, because we're going to go over all the stuff that wasn't addressed, that was altered, that was moved, that was at that scene that covered up Michelle's death. Both suicide and homicide has to be weighed and carefully examined at the scene. Homicide needs to be excluded from any and all crime scenes by the investigating detective before suicide can be ruled as the cause of death. I examined all findings by the medical examiner, their reports, their notes, their documentations, the medical examiner's investigative report, all case summaries, FDLE's reports, all of their photographs, evidence available for viewing, and anything that I could find. All case summaries provided by the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office and all their reports and all their crime scenes, and especially their report, are listed on the website for your review. State Attorney R.J. Loretta stated he had a conflict of interest with the Sheriff's Office at that time. It stands to reason that his conflict would extend to all cases involved shootings in St. Johns County. Therefore, my belief is he should recuse himself from any matters concerning the Sheriff's Office to maintain impartiality and fairness in the legal process. And in my personal opinion, he had no right to recuse himself, and I don't think he had any conflict. I think he was asked to do that. A deputy sheriff's service weapon, we all know, must be secure, stored, and locked in locations, ensuring no unauthorized individual has access to that weapon. And as responsible citizens, we are consistently reminded of the importance of safely securing our firearms within our homes. And we are held to accountable standards if any harm is caused by that misuse. However, in the case of Michelle O'Connell's death, Deputy Banks had multiple weapons scattered throughout that room as evidence in the crime scene photos, in which was not so properly secured. This negligence on his part allowed Michelle O'Connell to gain access to his weapon, making him liable for her use of it. That's what they say. That theory is wrong, and I'm going to prove it to you. So let's begin with the night that Michelle died. Both Jeremy and Michelle went to a concert at the St. Augustine Amphitheater, and they went with some friends. They didn't ride together. Michelle O'Connell and Jeremy Banks actually sat with Michelle's brother, and the people that they met up with later after the concert had ridden a motorcycle, but they had met up later. So both Jeremy and Michelle, they leave the concert at 10 o'clock. They both arrive at the surf station, which is a little ways, about 15-minute walk down from there, so they get there about 10:15. Everybody agrees that Michelle had a cigarette at the surf station. It took about 10 minutes for them talking and her smoking a cigarette. That can be confirmed by two of the friends, Andrew Garris and Crystal Cercato. They all said they left the surf station about 10:25. They went back to Jeremy's house. And it took about 15 to 20 minutes to drive to his house, which is south of St. Augustine. This would make the time to arrive at Jeremy's house about 10:40, 10:45 p.m. And according to the two friends, they stayed at Jeremy's house for about 30 to 45 minutes. Well, I don't believe that's right, so we'll get into that in a minute. According to Andrew's interview with Agent Rogers, they left the house before 11 p.m., and I'll discuss that here shortly. So sometime around 11:10, 11:15, 11:25, 11:30, both Garris and Cercato left Jeremy's house. All them times cannot be correct. We know that the 911 call was made at 11:20 and that the sheriff's office right at 11:25. Michelle O'Connell was pronounced dead at 11:48 p.m. According to Jeremy Banks' statement in the case summary, he instructed Garris and Cercato to leave per Michelle's instructions because he said everything was fine. And we'll get into more of that. However, Garris denied in his interview with Agent Rogers and denied that Jeremy asked him to stay. Cercato, on the other hand, told Agent Rogers in her interview that Jeremy had texted Andrew asking him to stay, but because Michelle was acting crazy. In her affidavit, Cercato also mentioned that Jeremy wanted them to stay in case Michelle became more unstable. And we're going to talk about that because later on we're going to see Michelle was not unstable and everything was fine. There was no arguing. Both Garris and Cercato said Michelle came outside to retrieve her makeup bag and Jeremy went to the garage door to talk to her, but never entered the house. From Banks' interview, he visited Michelle several times after Garrison and Cotto left the residence to talk about the breakup and asked for things like a kiss, who's going to get the dog, and Michelle's little daughter not liking him. Jeremy also made the statement to Michelle, do not do anything stupid. And we're going to get into that a little bit later. So if Garrison and Cotto had stayed at the residence for 30 to 45 minutes, the time frame can be broken down as follows. If it took 15 minutes to arrive at this residence, they get there at 10:40. If they stayed 30 minutes at the residence, they left about 11:10 p.m. Well, we know the last time Jeremy seen Michelle was at 11:10, so that cannot be right. If it took 20 minutes to arrive at the residence at 10:45 and they stayed for 30 minutes, they'd had to leave at 11:15. We know that's not right because they already left, because Jeremy last seen Michelle at 11:10. So if they arrived at the residence at 15 minutes, it took them to get there, they'd be there at 10:40. And if they stayed for 45 minutes at the residence, they'd have left at 11:25. So we know none of that is correct. So we have to go with the time frame that they left at 11 o'clock, and we're going to show you why here in a little while. So the 911 call we know was placed at 11:20 p.m. by Banks. The timeline of the 45 minutes that they gave could not be correct because it does not correspond to the events and the timeline that was given and on the 911 tapes. At 11:10 p.m. was the last time Banks said he seen Michelle alive. This would place them at the residence between the 10:40 and 11 p.m. So that's the time frame. Banks had been with Michelle for approximately 20 minutes, and he had plenty of time to talk to Michelle, and several times going inside the house to the bedroom where she was packing to leave. Jeremy mentioned about a kiss, who gets the dog, and about Michelle's daughter liking him or not. What he fails to mention is that the bedroom door being locked any time except in his statement about the shooting. If he's going back and forth to Michelle all this time to go talk to her, and this door was never locked, and all of a sudden it was locked, that does not make any sense. The medical examiner investigative report, as reported by Detective Tolbert, provides a timeline indicating that Jeremy last saw Michelle at that 11:10 p.m. This is crucial because Blanks claims that he visited Michelle multiple times after they had left, and which they departed at before 11:10 p.m. Banks and Michelle were together for that 20 minutes before the 911 call, aligning the time frame with the witnesses Hadley and Boswell, who FDLE had discovered and interviewed. The gap between 11:10 and 11:20 raises questions about the 8-minute delay in the 911 calling of Jeremy Banks, emphasizing the importance of all investigating aspects of this case. The circumstances surrounding Michelle O'Connell's death raises questions about the timeline and events leading up to her tragic end, including the feasibility of her completing multiple actions in a short period of time after Banks leaves the room. So let's talk about that. So if Michelle committed suicide, did she have enough time when Banks left that room and go sit on his motorcycle in the garage to lock the bedroom door, get the pill bottles, place those pills in her pocket, which she never took, place the bottles back in her purse, grab the surplus weapon from the floor, figure out how to get the gun from a 3-point retention holster that is secured in a deputy's holster, fire a warning shot, then shoot herself in the mouth? Is there enough time in the timeline for Michelle to commit all these steps as soon as Jeremy leaves the room and sits on the motorcycle in the garage? No, there is not. Banks' statement to Michelle on the night of her death: do not do anything stupid. Why would he leave his duty belt if he claims she committed suicide with his weapon on the floor where Michelle had access to it? Does this seem like a worried boyfriend or a deputy sheriff who has the training, knowledge in firearms and security in firearms? The door was unlocked at some point. How come Banks did not take his weapon out of the room? Because maybe he already had it with him. Nobody seems to ask that question. And we're going to get into some other evidence that was nearby on the kitchen counter. Is it possible to speculate Banks' duty holster was locked in a retention position because he already had the gun and the retention lock was already locked? Interestingly, there was a black holster on the kitchen counter that was never collected as evidence. How we know that Banks did not get his gun, put that holster on the kitchen counter? They photographed that. One could theorize that Banks already had his weapon with him. Additionally, it could be theorized that he was angry because Michelle had locked the door to keep him out because she wanted to finish packing and didn't want nothing else to do with him. Another theory could be that Jeremy kicked the door in, resulting in a struggle where a shot was fired into the floor, prompting Michelle to scream for help. This could explain why the first shot went into the floor. Furthermore, it could be theorized that Jeremy hit Michelle over the eye, causing her to scream for help again, followed by the fatal shot. This theory aligns with accounts of the two witnesses who heard screams for help, followed by the gunshot, which was proven by the FDLE during their canvassing of the neighborhood to find witnesses. The presence of Michelle's pink armband on the floor near her feet raises questions about whether it was moved during the struggle. It's worth noting that Deputy Banks' other pistol was found in his car. It was secured in a gun holster underneath his steering wheel, but his other weapon, which he claims was in his duty belt, and there's another holster laying on the counter. Why was there an empty holster lying on the kitchen counter? One could theorize that the two bullet casings nearby and in the same location was fired from the same location. If you have two shell casings and they're in almost the exact same position, that means that gun was fired in almost the same exact position. This could also make sense where the shot to the floor exists and the angle of the shot. And since both of their shell casings were together, the ejection from the gun had to be in that same location. Could the duty belt already be lying on the floor empty of that weapon because Banks already had his weapon out? No, none of these questions were ever asked. Was homicide ever ruled out in this case? No, it wasn't. Upon arrival at the sheriff's office at 11:25, Deputy Hawley was the first to enter the house and discover Jeremy Banks holding Michelle in his arms. That's untrue, as stated in his reports and statements. As other officers arrived, the scene was being secured, and Sergeant Beaver instructed Deputy Haller to capture photographs of the scene, while Deputy Maynard was asked to remove Jeremy from the residence. Sergeant Beaver had concerns about Jeremy's involvement in the case and appearance of the scene, that something was up. By requesting the photographs, Sergeant Beaver ensured the preservation of that scene and the most important eight photographs ever of that scene. Jeremy was holding Michelle's right hand, and according to the interviews with the responding deputies and Banks, nothing in the room was touched or moved before Deputy Hawley's first 8 photographs. That is very, very important. And I'm going to prove to you why that's very, very important, because it's going to be a pristine scene without anything touched. Nothing was touched. Nothing was moved. Nothing was altered at that time until later. So on September 2nd, 2010, we know at 11:20, Jeremy Banks made that call to 911. And to report his girlfriend had just shot herself with his serve weapon. At no time did the Sheriff's Office Center transfer Jeremy to the Fire Rescue Division to let EMS personnel have details of the injury and try to get Jeremy Banks to check for a pulse or provide any medical intervention. Banks never questioned for an ambulance for Michelle, but please get someone to my house. Banks thought Michelle just shot herself. Well, he thinks so. He doesn't know. He's not sure until he makes the next statement. She shot herself. In the next statement, he pleads again, please get somebody here, please. Again, he's not asking for help or an ambulance. When the 911 call, operator mistakenly calls Jeremy, ma'am, his demeanor completely changes. Bank tells the 911 operator, it's sir, listen, hang on. Now look here, let me tell you the truth. Is he lying before this statement? Let me tell you the truth. I am Deputy Banks with the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office. I work with y'all. Get someone here now. Why does he make that statement? Let me tell you the truth. Because it could make a difference. Because he is a deputy sheriff and he already said the word suicide. When the 911 operator asked about Michelle's breathing, Banks replied that she was not breathing and there was blood everywhere. Well, there wasn't blood everywhere. I'm gonna tell you where the blood was at. And then without checking for a pulse. If Banks had attempted to check for a pulse, he would have realized that Michelle had a pulse and could have relayed this information to expedite the arrival of an ambulance. It is important to note that Banks never asked for help from Michelle, specifically request an ambulance, despite being trained in CPR and having an ability to assist her right then and there. Once the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office arrived and started to arrive and access the scene, it was determined that Michelle had a heart rate of about 42 beats per minute. And Banks was removed from the house, inside the house to the outside. And all life-saving interventions by paramedics, once they arrived, pronounced Michelle O'Connell dead at the scene. So the photographs depicts Michelle lying supine on the floor. And for you that do not know what supine is, that means you're lying flat on your back, looking straight up. Her head is very near the bed. There's a bed there. It has a bunch of clothes on the bed. And her head is like right up against the blanket that's coming down on the floor. So now we're going to start getting into a little bit of some of this evidence that was at the scene. They never packaged and they never took for forensic study. But they altered it, they tampered with it, they moved it, and discarded it. And that's a cover-up. So there's a shirt above Michelle's head on the bed. It's stained with blood. How do I know that? Well, we're going to tell you here in a little while. How would the presence of a bullet hole in the carpet next to her right upper arm raises questions about the sequence of events. And it suggests an angle inconsistent with a warning shot fired while standing. A closer examination of the bullet hole indicates that it points toward her arm, implying that the bullet hit the floor at the angle. This observation is supported by crime scene photos such as photo number 7, taken before any evidence was tampered or altered or removed. According to Banks' statement, he found a bullet after the investigation that was fired into the floor behind a desk. That desk was located near the bedroom door. And yet, since no forensic evidence was found to the scene to include the missing bullet, who knows where Jeremy Banks found that bullet? One thing is for sure, I think Banks tampered with that evidence. He should have called the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office and have them come out there and process the scene again to find out where that bullet was, to whether, hey, is it at the angle that the Sheriff's Office says it is? Did Michelle fire a warning shot? For me, that is also tampering with evidence in doing that. He gave that bullet to his sergeant, and his sergeant kept it at his house. For me, that's also tampering with evidence again. The St. Johns County Sheriff's Office should have received a warrant for the resident and checked the location path of the bullet under the carpet and where that bullet traveled. The positioning of the ejected shell casings contradicts Michelle firing that weapon in an upside down position or any other way. Now, this ejection part of the gun is typically on the right side and ejects to the right of the shoulder. Michelle was not facing the bed when she was shot. And if she was facing away from the bed, which she's lying supine, there's no way that the ejected shell casings would be over there. So Sheriff Shore hired Mr. Matthews to look at this case, and his review, he points out a flaw concerning that missing bullet. He agrees that a crime scene technician should have examined the damage and searched for the projectile until found. 100%. That light blue-gray shirt on the bed above Michelle's head, which was not collected as evidence by the authorities, appears to have that blood stain, the bullet holes, and along with the gunshot residue. And we're going to tell you a lot more about that shirt here shortly. This oversight is significant, as the shirt could provide crucial evidence in the investigation into Michelle's death. Despite this disappearance of this key piece of evidence, and its photographic documentation remains a valuable resource and admissible in a court of law. It is very clear that Michelle O'Connell, who was paralyzed and unconscious, could never have placed the shirt on the bed herself. Never. In Deputy Hawley's second photo, it seems that Michelle's picture was taken from the master bedroom, giving a wider view of that room. And it shows more placement of the items before they were even moved. While some questions have already been answered, there are still certain questions that need to be addressed. For instance, Michelle's pink wristband, which she wore at the concert, that's on the floor. It's beside her. It's worth noting that in all the people at that concert showing them wearing that band, it's on their right wrist. The significance of this lies in the fact that the band appears to have been removed from Michelle's wrist. The wristband was not examined for fingerprints. It wasn't even collected for DNA evidence. If Michelle was still wearing her shoes that night, which she was, that proves to everybody and to me that she was leaving. If she was going to stay at the house and she wasn't leaving, she would have taken her shoes off and started relaxing for the night. One can speculate that she was facing the bed when the shot was fired into the floor, causing the casing to be ejected in that location. However, the second shot with the gun fired upside down requires a thorough explanation and proper crime scene investigation, which was not done correctly. And according to every one of the sheriff's office angles and the medical examiner, there's no way Michelle could have shot herself in the way that they said that she did. There's no way. Michelle O'Connell was wearing the same clothes she wore at the concert and never changed, as also evident that she was leaving. On the other hand, Banks was not in the same clothes he wore to the concert. He took off a long sleeve shirt and replaced it by a yellow t-shirt. So, and under that yellow t-shirt was a white t-shirt. He placed the long sleeve shirt in the laundry basket, which can be seen in the crime scene photos. The sheriff's office collected Banks' t-shirt, but did not collect the white t-shirt, and we'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. So what was the state of mind of the detectives that night? We know that the white t-shirt was never collected. The long sleeve shirt was never collected. None of the rest of his clothes were ever collected. This goes along with any and all evidence that should have been collected. It's going to point to the cover-up. Research indicates that the presence of gunpowder residue in the specific hand locations is crucial to determine whether the gunshot was self-inflicted or self-defense. Gunpowder residue on the hands inside the palms are suggestive of a defensive stance, while residue on the outside of the hands indicates suicide and fatal shooting. Additionally, primer and the gunpowder leave traces on the hands of individuals who handled the firearm or came into contact with someone who did. Banks was found to have minimal traces of gunshot residue on his hands, specifically 1 micron. If he's holding Michelle O'Connell's hand, he's going to have more than 1 micron, and he's going to have gunshot residue on his clothes by entering the room. So let's talk about the pill bottles. 50 pills were found inside the right-hand pocket of Michelle O'Connell's pants. These pills belonged to who other? Jeremy Banks. These pills matched the pill bottles that were found inside Michelle's purse that was sitting on the kitchen counter in the open position for everybody to see, kind of like their stage. Hey, I want everybody to see these pills. One contend that Michelle was thinking of committing suicide due to the pills found in her right pocket. If Michelle died of an overdose after an autopsy revealed such blood records, that would make sense. Would a pill bottle examined for fingerprints? Yes, and none of them was found. None of her fingerprints were found. Were the pills examined for DNA? Nope. Were Michelle's pants or belt examined for fingerprints? Nope. Was Michelle's purse examined for fingerprints? Nope. How did the pills get into Michelle's pocket? Why would she put them there? She didn't take none of them. Why would she shoot herself if she was going to take pills? Crime scene investigators and deputies found a duty belt belonging to Jeremy Banks located on the floor to the left side of Michelle. In the sheriff's office case summary, it was stated, it is important to note that the retention hood of the holster was in a secured position, and we already know that. Is this important? It's highly important. You can look at the retention holster hood in 4 ways. Banks already had the gun out of the holster and carried it with him that night of Michelle's death, and when the belt was placed back on the floor, the retention hood became locked. Michelle O'Connell grabbed the gun from the holster and purposely locked the retention hood back. Very doubtful. She don't know how to get that gun out of that retention holster. That's why deputies and sheriff's departments around the world have a secure way of securing their guns. And another thing, Michelle never touched a holster, belt, or gun. There was a fight. Maybe there was a fight over a gun. A person cannot just take that weapon from that 3-point retention holster. If that's the case, then they all need a new retention holster because now everybody knows how to release a deputy sheriff or a police officer's gun. Was Michelle's fingerprints on the duty belt or retention holster? We don't know. We know Michelle's DNA was on the weapon, but could that have been in a struggle over the gun? Could be. Did Michelle handle the gun? But the absence of Jeremy Banks' DNA on the weapon is alarming. That's his gun. His DNA is found nowhere on that gun. That is crazy. When a person enters a room after a gun is fired, that person is going to get residue on their clothes no matter what. I can tell you, after DFDLE got the gun, there was no blood on the gun. There was nothing. So when Jeremy goes inside of the room, he uses the cordless phone from the living room because he didn't use his cell phone or the phone by the kitchen. He said after he went and got the phone, he kicked the door in. Did the phone have blood on it, and was it tested for DNA or fingerprints? Sheriff Shore contends that Banks got blood on his shirt on the inside of that yellow T-shirt. There's only 2 specks of blood on the inside of his T-shirt. On his hands, on the shirt. So how can blood be on the phone or Banks' hand? Michelle only had 2 specks of blood on the right outside hand, the size of freckles, and on one of her fingers. It appears from the pictures of the crime scene photo the charger to the phone was located in the master bedroom. So why did he have to go running into the living room? According to Banks' statement, he kicked the bedroom door, and when he heard the second gunshot from inside the room. Well, crime scene photos show the door has a defect on the outside of the door. This defect is apparent that it was forced open and consistent with the lock being in a locked position. What is disturbing is a statement that Banks gave, said that when he went to talk to Michelle several times after their friends left, he even tried to get a kiss, and we all know that because I done told you that. But he said, don't do anything stupid. The door was not locked during any of this time because he said everything was fine. Why is Jeremy saying do not do anything stupid? And remember, he tells both Andrew Garris and Crystal Scotto that everything is fine. Y'all can leave. There's nothing wrong. And he tells you he's talking to her, about the breakup. So there are 2 possible theories of the door being forced. One is that Jeremy did indeed kick the door open when he heard a gunshot from inside the bedroom. Second, he kicked the door open due to an argument with Michelle. And there's only one side of the investigation from a living perspective, and that is from Jeremy Banks. The other side of the investigation should be of the utmost importance from any investigator or crime scene technicians or forensic personnel doing the investigation. And that is to speak for the dead. There is a lot of investigation evidence that was left out due to everyone saying suicide from the very beginning of this case. So let's go to Andrew Garris' interview with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. On May the 25th, 2011, Agents Rusty Rogers conducted a tape-recorded interview with Andrew Garris regarding this incident on September 2nd, 2010. He provided a signed affidavit to the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office also detailing events leading up to the time him and Crystal had left Jeremy's house on that night. And according to Andrew, and Banks informed him at the concert that he and Michelle were having minor arguments. After leaving the concert, Andrew, Crystal, Jeremy, Michelle all reconvened at Jeremy's house. Andrew Garris mentioned that Michelle was packing her belongings to leave, which she was leaving, and approximately 30 minutes later, he and Crystal departed during the interview. Andrew voluntarily shared his knowledge of the night, stating that he and Crystal rode their motorcycles and they were separate from Michelle. They didn't ride in the same vehicle. They met up with Jeremy and Michelle inside a concert, and they was sitting in different areas. They didn't sit together. And Andrew observed that Jeremy and Michelle were not arguing. And again, they were not arguing. They were somewhat quiet. They weren't talking as much and reserved. And following the concert, he said he and Crystal parked his motorcycle opposite the venue, and then they met up at the surf station, which we didn't learn. And they stayed for about 10 to 15 minutes while Michelle smoked a cigarette. And it took them about 10 to 20 minutes to get back to the house. And they got back home by that 11 p.m. And we know from him that they left at 11 p.m. because they had to go pick up Crystal's daughter. And we'll get into that more in a minute. Andrew said Jeremy told him after they had left, he was hanging out in the garage when he heard a gunshot. He then ran into the house and grabbed the phone and hid behind the counter in the kitchen. And he heard a second shot. And at the time, he kicked the door in and found Michelle. Jeremy told Andrew he could not believe how quickly Michelle had gotten blue and pale. And that's the end of part 1.